This armory dates to 1939. It was designed by local architect Joseph Wolob in collaboration with the Tacoma architect Roland Bortek, and designed in 1938. Construction started in 1938 and was completed in May of 1939. It's now 83 years old and was built to last for a long time. And what we've learned, though, throughout this history of the building as well, is that it was also a community center, because the drill floor really was a place where the community gathered for all sorts of activities. And it's something that really shows that this was really key in our community, that kind of evokes a lot of stories from our past.
This armory was very important to the community. The building was built in the late 1930s, and but in the 40s and 50s and on into the 60s, I think it was very, very important. Certainly as a training facility for our National Guardsmen and Guardswomen, but for the community as a whole, as a kind of a community center.
Well, it's a landmark in and of itself, so everybody knows the armory. This was the place.
It's not so much the building, which served this great purpose for us, but it's the relationships that are built during that time.
When I was a senior in high school, Richard Nunez, whose family owned Jack's Shoe Repair downtown, he was in the Guard and he tried to recruit me for the National Guard, brought me up here, and I was a senior. I didn't really want to join the Guard at that. I later was in the Army after college, but I remember getting the sales pitch up here. It brought back a lot of memories coming in here. I haven't been in this room probably for more than 50 years, but I was in here numerous times when I was a young boy, and for basketball games, wrestling matches, other community events that were held here. St. Martin's College played their home games here. We all know now that St. Martin's today has a beautiful gymnasium, a large gymnasium on their campus, but they didn't back in the 40s and 50s, and so they played their home games here. This is a large room. It's set up for basketball now, but on the flanks, they aren't there now, but there were grandstands, so it could hold quite a number of people to watch a home game. So I attended, I'm a sports fan, I attended college basketball games here with watching St. Martin's College.
I came to St. Martin's in the fall of 1962 on a basketball scholarship, and at that time they had been working on the new Capitol Pavilion, now Marcus Pavilion, I think since about 1958. And so this was an interim use, turned out to be an interim use for almost 2 decades, I guess, because they actually played college basketball games in here in the early 1950s, 1947 until about 1956, I think. In 1958, was the league officials declined to allow anybody to play basketball games that were sanctioned by the conference. The issue being several. One, they didn't have the glass backboards. Two, some of the striping wasn't correct. But most importantly, in 1947, they rebuilt this floor, and they built it with 2x4s on end. And so it's, as you can tell, it's very, very hard. And what, a normal basketball floor is built with either straw or felt, cork, something that gives it some give. And even the hardwood is designed that it's in a softer wood that would allow for some spring. So by the time I came, they weren't able to, not able to play any basketball games here. So we ended up playing basketball games all over the county and high schools. We were known as the nomads of basketball in the Pacific Northwest because we were the only school that didn't have a home. But we practiced here every day. So I was in here over the course of 3 seasons, beginning in October through March, along with 14, 15 other guys who were on the same team. So they began playing basketball games here in 1947, and the Capitol Pavilion didn't open until 1958. I think some of the memories for me really center on the people that I played with. I walk into here and I see faces from the early 60s, most of whom I still know today, but the faces have changed a little. And yeah, that's the lasting sort of memory from my perspective. There was a lot of different kind of eclectic events that took place in here. Car shows were in here. The vehicles that were in here at the time, I was just trying to figure out how it was that they got in. I'm thinking it's through a modification of the entrance door here. So sometimes they would be left here. They have a Jeep sitting in the middle of the floor. We had to work our way around it and that sort of thing. And mostly they would, somebody would find a key and start it up and get it out of here. But because they'd been sitting for so long and they were so old, they would emit a plume of smoke that would kind of hang in the facility, so that by the time you got through practicing, you felt like you smoked a pack of cigarettes.
I also came here several times to watch pro wrestling matches, which they used to call it wrestling rather than wrestling. College wrestling and Olympic wrestling is wrestling, but pro wrestling was wrestling, pro wrestling was more show business than athletics, in a way. But they did have a promoter here in town by the name of Cliff Olson who put on wrestling matches that were held in here, and I attended a number of them. I was interested in that. I wrestled at Olympia High School and was interested in that sport. One of the things that's memorable about the wrestling matches was the late 40s and early 50s, we were in the height of the Cold War with our competition with the Soviet Union, or Russia as we know it today. And they often had matches involving people who were allegedly Russian. Now, whether they really were or not, I don't know. But I remember they had tag team matches where, those are matches where you have 2 wrestlers on each side. And they had some Russians, some alleged Russians by the name of Igor and Soldat Gorky, which are very Russian-sounding names. And they were, of course, the villains because the Soviet Union and communism were our competitors for the United States at that time. And the one thing about those wrestling matches, the 2 that were wrestling the Russians would get beat up pretty bad all during the match, but right toward the end they would somehow summon strength and end up pinning the 2 Russians, much to the crowd's delight, of course. And it was, as I say, more show business than athleticism, although those guys that wrestled back then were pretty athletic, really, to do all the things that they had to do to put on a show. But that was very memorable to me as a kid, and whether they were really Russians, I don't know, but we, as little kids, we believed it, certainly, and it was great to see those events. So those are very memorable to me. But there were lots of other events held in this building. It was kind of the Olympia Convention Center. There were several gubernatorial inaugural balls that were held in this. My father, I was rustling through some old things. My father was a master of ceremonies at one of the inaugural balls in the 1940s that was held here. They also held dog shows, automobile shows, all kinds of things that you would have in a convention center or a community center. So it really filled an important function in this community. It was really the only place you could really get a big crowd like this in one facility.
My grandfather was the caretaker here, and he was a caretaker for the grounds outside and the interior. It doesn't look anything like Grandpa and Grandma's apartment any longer. There's no bed, there's no phone. But we're standing right now into what was their apartment many years ago. At one time, the Olympia Armory was what we think of the Worthington Center now. Most everything was here, whether it was a car show, dog show. I remember there was a dog show here. And I've learned that after a dog has been groomed and pampered and all ready for competition, that you don't pet the dog. The dog won't bite, but the owner will. I learned that. Don't pet the groomed dog. And then I remember specifically when, and I don't know if people remember Gorgeous George or not, but in his time, in the 50s, he was the Muhammad Ali of wrestling. I know they needed a place, a venue for wrestling and boxing matches. So my grandfather and his magic, he was amazing, built a regulation boxing ring. And I'm sure the 4 corner posts were 10 by 10s. But not only did he need to build it to use, because a very famous wrestler, Gorgeous George, came to town, but he had to construct it so that he could disassemble it and put it away. And then the next time they needed it, to bring it out, set it back up. Now, you have to think about how strong and sturdy a boxing ring would have to be. So it was quite a chore to take it back down and bring back up, but he did. You know, I kind of felt like a niece of all the guardsmen, because they knew who I was. My grandfather was Pop. I don't think anybody knew his first name. It was Thomas, but everybody called him Pop. All the guardsmen called him Pop, and he was their uncle, dad, if you will. And knowing that I was his granddaughter, if they caught me climbing on a tank, they were, now Ray, I want you to come down just as carefully as you went up, and then they would help me back down. But the armory was basically my playground when I was very young.
I'm Captain Heidi Hansen. I was a former commander for 2146, Headquarters Battery. I took command as the first female battery commander for the 2146 and loved every minute of it and miss it still. You know, this armory is pretty historic and at times it's been difficult to work out of, but you know, I think we've all loved being downtown in this area and representing the National Guard here. And I will always remember and appreciate the patience and respect that I got from the leaders here. It really made me feel like I was a part of a unit that was more like a family than a job. There's a lot more of that sense of ownership and respect. There's so many things I'll miss about it, but I think it's just the history and like knowing that people who came before me were all, like great people before me have been here. I definitely appreciate the little things about this armory. It kind of felt like a home. For me, the building itself is, it's more about the people than the building. When you walk through it, you have those memories and you feel connected to the community because of it.
My name's Josh Medford, and I enlisted in the Washington Army National Guard in January of 1998. And I was assigned here to the Olympia Armory with the Headquarters and Headquarters Battery, 2nd Battalion, 146th Field Artillery. To me, this was a home away from home, and I say that because there was so much time spent here, and you know, depending on the situation of how late we were working or whatnot, it would depend on whether or not I would stay here at the Armory or if I'd, you know, make the long drive an hour away home at night. And some days, you know, you're too exhausted to drive home, so you throw up a cot and you stay here, or you're working really late. There's been a lot of nights where I've been in here till 1 o'clock in the morning doing paperwork. I remember distinctly one time that they held a job fair here, and they were helping homeless veterans trying to find jobs, and they're, you know, giving them opportunities to shower There was a barber here that was shaving and cutting hair. That was pretty awesome. You know, you build this is definitely the house that you build another family with. And there's a lot of lifelong friends that I met in this building. And so I think it's gonna be really great that this is gonna be preserved. And, you know, yeah, the friendships that I've established here.
I'm Admiral Wezick. I'm the director of the CFMO, which is the Construction and Facilities Management Office for the state of Washington, Washington Army National Guard. So this is the Olympia Armory, not quite known as a readiness center, but more known as an armory because it goes back to the 1930s, actually constructed in 1939. It's an art modern facility, one of only a few in the state. It's gone through the process of being identified as eligible for historic preservation, and the City of Olympia has strong interest in the facility and maintaining it, and they collaborated with us for many months, the past couple of years actually. We wanted to safeguard, if you will, the history of the National Guard and its presence here, despite whoever is going to own it. And despite it being 90 years old, it's still in great shape. It just doesn't meet the needs of our modern Army National Guard and Army mission, both domestic operations and federal mission. We just want to make sure that the legacy of the National Guard that's been here for 90 years, all the soldiers that have served here throughout those decades, the wars that they've supported and participated in to defend our country, defend our state, that's important to us. That though the chapter may close and a new chapter opens or begins with another entity coming into this facility, we don't want the book or the history to be destroyed.
I'm glad that the building will be maintained and a constant reminder of the importance of this building in our community.
I, for one, I know many others are really pleased that the building is going to be preserved, and not only preserved, but find a greater integration into the community with other things that can be done here.
I think it's wonderful that we're transitioning this space into something positive and will continue to be a part of the community.